What if I told you that the way you observe reality right now is keeping you trapped in an infinite superposition of unrealized potential? And there's groundbreaking research from MIT's Quantum Cognition Lab that proves why your manifestation attempts haven't crystallized. The instant you grasp what's actually occurring with each moment of conscious awareness, you'll recognize that observation isn't about passively witnessing existence. It's about actively collapsing probability waves into your chosen reality. Here's what's revolutionary about this discovery. Every human being makes approximately 35,000 unconscious observations in a single day. Yet 99.9% of these observations occur in complete automaticity. You're observing while doom-scrolling social feeds, trapped in routine patterns, lying awake replaying worst-case scenarios, bouncing between distractions, drowning in overwhelm. Yet, you never question why your manifested world continues mirroring your chaotic attention. You keep attempting to manipulate your visible outcomes without grasping that you're transmitting a specific probability signature through the quality of your awareness to the very fabric of reality itself. But there's something even more revolutionary happening that most people never encounter. Your observation pattern is actually determining which quantum possibilities materialize into form. Consider it like selecting from infinite channels of reality with every focused moment. When you observe from limitation consciousness, you're literally collapsing limitation potentials into your experience. When you observe from abundance awareness, you're collapsing abundance probabilities into that same experiential field. The quantum substrate doesn't differentiate between your internal focus and external manifestations. It simply crystallizes whichever possibilities you're consistently energizing through your observational pattern. This collapse process operates at scales far beyond what your thinking mind can measure. We're discussing genuine wave function dynamics that occur at the foundational level every time you direct attention. Dr. Dean Radin's research on consciousness-matter interaction demonstrates that focused human awareness can influence quantum random number generators. Coherent observation when you're intentionally focused, chaotic observation when you're mentally scattered. Your attention pattern directly influences quantum probability distributions, which means you're literally sculpting reality with awareness every moment of your existence. The ancient mystery schools understood this mechanism and described it as wielding the scepter of divine choice. They knew that deliberate observation could actually determine the timeline template of your unfolding experience, manifesting circumstances that seemed impossibly remote and navigating futures far beyond probable trajectories. They weren't engaging in wishful fantasies. They were implementing precise understanding of how awareness interfaces with probability through observation. This is exactly why visualization and intention setting fail most practitioners. But there's a quantum principle that revolutionizes everything. When you discover that each observation generates a collapse signature that either crystallizes your preferred timeline or obliterates it, you can stop manipulating your circumstances and begin selecting your reality from the probability level. I'm going to unveil the precise four-stage collapse method that shifts you from being probability's passenger to becoming reality's conscious selector. Plus, you'll discover the superposition awareness technique that activates this transformation in just 0.3 seconds, making you the decisive observer around which possibilities condense instead of being scattered across endless potential realities. Each unconscious observation is a squandered opportunity to literally choose your existence. Most people forfeit 35,000 selection moments daily. Your entrance into this physical dimension didn't begin with action. It began with observation. Your inaugural participation in Earth wasn't through doing, speaking, or even moving. It was through witnessing. Your consciousness anchored into this dimension, not through behavioral complexity or strategic sophistication, but through the elegant simplicity of pure awareness. In that Genesis moment, you possessed wisdom that modern conditioning has concealed. Observation functions as the bridge between your current timeline and your emerging timeline. Yet somewhere in your socialization, you learn to observe like a passive receptor rather than the conscious selector you are. You transitioned from sovereignty-centered awareness to survival-centered attention. Right now, become conscious of your observation pattern. Where does your awareness habitually settle? For most individuals, it's likely reactive, fragmented, and concentrated on problem recognition. This is what I term automated observation, the type that maintains psychological function while leaving your sovereignty undernourished. Ancient knowledge systems understood something our contemporary paradigm has abandoned. From the Buddhist concept of Rigpa to the Hermetic understanding of mental transmutation, civilizations throughout history recognized observation as infinitely more than mere passive witnessing. They knew it served as the sacred mechanism between potential and actualization, between wave and particle, between quantum field and manifested form. In these traditions, intentional observation wasn't simply a practice. It was the primary creative act. Egyptian initiates taught that every observation carried the capacity to activate distinct reality frequencies. Ancient seers realized that awareness could transform not only your internal interpretation, but the actual probability structure of circumstances surrounding you. They weren't speaking metaphorically. They comprehended that conscious observation involves more than processing sensory data through your perception system. You're collapsing potentiality into materiality itself. Consider this mechanism. Every experience you've had, every decision you've materialized, every instant of manifestation or confusion has been accompanied by a specific observation quality. During scattered thinking, your awareness becomes diffuse and powerless. In moments of focused presence, it naturally becomes concentrated and creative. Your observation doesn't merely reflect your reality, it selects your reality. The distinction between automated observation and conscious observation is sovereignty. Automated observation happens to you. Conscious observation flows through you with you as an active participant in the dialogue between your awareness and the probability field enveloping you. When you begin observing with precision, with presence, with recognition of this fundamental act connecting you to creative power, something extraordinary unfolds. You cease being a passive recipient of whatever timeline appears and transform into an active chooser in materializing it. This is where observation becomes sacred. Every observation from this place no longer merely registers phenomena. It crystallizes probability. What I'm about to share will shatter the illusion that has imprisoned you. You believe you simply witness a pre-existing reality, but you're actually collapsing it into being. Most humans spend their entire existence believing they observe an objective world. You awaken each morning, and immediately your attention fixates. What's happening on my device? What went wrong yesterday? I wonder about potential threats today. Perhaps I should check for validation. You assume this observational habit represents neutral perception. But what if this assumption is fundamentally incorrect? At this moment, while engaging with these words, I invite you to try something radical. Notice what your awareness is selecting right now. This time, don't attempt to change it. Simply witness where attention naturally gravitates. Observe the thoughts arising, the sensations present, then gently notice your noticing. As this occurs, something remarkable is happening. You're becoming the meta-observer of your observation, rather than merely the one observing. Now, while witnessing your awareness, notice what captures your attention repeatedly. It might be worries. This won't work for me, or judgments. I'm doing this wrong, or distractions. How much longer will this take? Here's the profound revelation. If you can perceive that observational pattern, if you can witness its selective nature and repetitive targeting, then you cannot be that automatic mechanism. You are the awareness that chooses where observation collapses reality. This marks the emergence of the sovereign observer, the aspect of you that exists beyond the habitual stream of reactive attention. Imagine standing in a vast hall of infinite mirrors. Your automatic thoughts represent reflections bouncing chaotically. Sometimes the images appear pleasant, sometimes they seem disturbing. But you, your authentic self, remain the one choosing which mirror to focus upon, which reflection to energize with sustained observation. You are not the reflections. You are the consciousness that selects which becomes real. Ancient wisdom traditions employed the metaphor of ocean and waves. Your observations resemble waves forming on the vast expanse of your awareness. Some waves appear turbulent and threatening, catastrophizing, fixating, ruminating. Others seem gentle and nourishing, appreciating, savoring, noticing beauty. But observe this carefully. The ocean itself remains undisturbed by which waves form. It stays constant, infinite, unchanged, regardless of stormy or calm surface conditions. This sovereign observer consciousness represents your authentic nature, the part of you unchanged since childhood, the part that will remain unchanged until your final observation. It's the chooser, the awareness, the silent selector that has been determining your entire life experience through where attention repeatedly collapses. But here's where this gets even more revolutionary. The sovereign observer isn't just choosing your thoughts and emotions. It's actually the collapse mechanism behind your materialized reality. Every major quantum physics discovery has pointed to this truth in different ways. The Copenhagen interpretation demonstrated observer effect. The delayed choice experiments showed consciousness determines measurement. The quantum Zeno effect revealed that observation literally freezes or changes system evolution. All were pointing to the same fundamental recognition. You are not observing a pre-existing reality. You are collapsing potentiality into actuality through observation. When you truly grasp this, everything changes about how you approach manifestation challenges. Instead of asking, "How can I change this situation?" you begin asking, "What possibility am I continuously collapsing through my observational focus?" Instead of resisting unwanted circumstances, you become fascinated by which probability you're unconsciously selecting. Instead of trying to force outcomes, you become strategic about where your observation persistently concentrates. This shift from passive witness to conscious selector to reality architect is what the ancient alchemists called the magnum opus. They weren't trying to transmute physical substances in some laboratory. They were transforming the lead of automatic observation into the gold of sovereign selection. The laboratory was their own awareness field, and observation was their primary tool of materialization. Modern quantum biology is now validating what these ancient traditions always knew. When you observe with sustained coherent focus, you actually influence probability outcomes at the quantum level. Dr. William Tiller's research demonstrates that focused human intention can significantly alter the pH of water and the activity of enzymes. Your observation literally starts collapsing probability fields that support the timeline you're selecting rather than the timeline you're fearing. But the sovereign observer state isn't just about personal timeline shifting. It's about remembering your role as a conscious probability selector in the universe's creative unfolding. When you're identified with automatic observation patterns, you're like a quantum particle that has forgotten it's simultaneously a wave, completely collapsed into limitation. But when you awaken to the sovereign observer, you remember you're not just the collapsed particle, you're also the wave function, the probability field, and the consciousness choosing which collapses into form all at once. This is why intentional observation is so powerful. Every observation from the sovereign state is like sending a clear instruction to the probability matrix. I remember what I am. I'm ready to consciously select which timeline materializes. The universe responds to this instruction by beginning to organize probability distributions that match your newfound coherence and clarity. Your automatic mind, that pattern of habitual attention, wants you believing reality is fixed. It constructs elaborate narratives about limitation, impossibility, others' power over you. It exists in constant fixation on past collapses and anxiety about future probabilities. But the sovereign observer exists only in this moment, in the eternal now, where genuine collapse power resides. When you begin identifying more with the sovereign observer and less with automatic attention, something profound transforms. You stop being a probabilities victim and become a timeline's architect. Instead of being overwhelmed by every collapse circumstance, you can observe its probability signature, acknowledge it, and consciously choose which alternative to energize with sustained observation. This is where authentic creative power begins. Focused awareness becomes your anchor to this sovereign observer consciousness. Each time you return attention to what you're selecting with observation, you're returning home to your true role. You're stepping away from the drama of collapsed outcomes into the power of probability selection. This transcends metaphysical philosophy. This is quantum mechanics in lived practice. The observer effect in quantum physics demonstrates that conscious observation literally determines which potential actualizes. When you become the conscious observer of your attention field, you gain power to influence and select your materialized world. Have you ever experienced moments when infinite possibilities seem to open simultaneously? Perhaps during profound insight or in deep meditative states, concealed in the space between collapsed reality and pure potential, exists a 0.3-second window where you can literally access superposition consciousness. Yet 99% of people never discover how to enter it. Those infinite possibility moments you just recalled weren't anomalies. They were glimpses of what becomes accessible when you slip into the space between definite outcomes, between collapsed states, between particle and wave. In that suspended instant, you touched something unlimited, something beyond binary either-or existence. You encountered superposition awareness. Consider your current reality now, but this time pay attention not only to what is manifested and what isn't, but to what exists between them. There's a state, brief yet profound, where both exist simultaneously. Your desire is present, yet the opposite also coexists. Then, before conventional observation, another pause before the next collapse moment begins. These aren't empty states, they're sacred gateways to infinite probability. Ancient Hermetic practitioners knew this secret. In mystery schools across continents, seeking adepts learned to enter these superposition states with their consciousness. They called it dwelling in the eternal middle, the space where opposing realities coexist before divine choice. These weren't merely meditation practices. They were training in accessing the field of uncollapsed potential that exists in every superposition moment. Hermeticists understood what quantum physics now validates. In the space between one collapsed state and another, all probabilities exist. It's like the moment before a coin lands. Without the airborne spin, there would be no choice, no possibility, only fixed outcome. Your awareness creates this same sacred opening in your existence. In this superposition moment, something extraordinary occurs. Your usual binary thinking disappears. The constant stream of either this or that, possible, impossible, success, failure, becomes quiet. In that openness, pure selection can emerge. Not the desperate grasping of ego, but the clear choosing of sovereignty. Here, your deepest intentions stop being wishes and become probability instructions to the field. Consider this moment as reality's womb itself. Just as a child exists in pure potential before gender determination, your timeline possibilities require this sacred indeterminacy to remain malleable. Ancient mystics called it the gateless gate, that paradoxical opening through which infinite probabilities must pass to become selected reality. Most people collapse instantly past these moments. They observe reactively, think binarily, always forcing toward definite outcomes. But when you learn to rest in superposition, when you can be comfortable in the space where opposing realities coexist simultaneously, you discover this is where all true creative power lives. It's not about forcing collapse or resisting observation. It's about learning presence with your awareness's quantum nature. In that presence, touching the place where selection meets infinite probability. In the superposition moment, you're not attempting to collapse one outcome. You're communing with all outcomes. But accessing this superposition awareness is only the beginning. Something deeper awaits awakening. Your probability signature has been transmitting patterns for years that you've been unconscious of. Those unrecognized signatures are literally determining your manifestation capacities. That deeper awakening I mentioned isn't discovered by thinking harder or visualizing more intensely. It's found by journeying inward, by descending from the mental realm into the sacred territory of your probability architecture. Just as ancient civilizations constructed magnificent geometric structures to house specific frequencies, you too must build an inner probability template, not with physical materials and effort, but with awareness and intentional observation. Consider the world's sacred geometries, Egypt's pyramid angles, cathedrals' golden ratios, the precise mathematical spaces where energy has concentrated for millennia to amplify specific frequencies. These weren't built randomly. Every angle was calculated with intention, every proportion designed to channel and concentrate creative force. Your probability field is identical. It's already a template, but most of us have never learned to architect it consciously. Ancient Egyptian initiates grasped this deeply. They mapped human consciousness as a living probability matrix with attention nodes corresponding to different manifestation chambers. They knew that observation was the key in coding each probability, revealing not just potential outcomes, but also the patterns, beliefs, and inherited signatures stored in your consciousness architecture. If this understanding is resonating with you, I invite you to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement helps this frequency reach others who are ready for this transformation. As you begin observing more consciously, you might notice something intriguing happening. Certain probability areas may feel blocked, resistant, or somehow inaccessible. Your career possibilities might feel limited by worthiness patterns you've carried for years. Your relationship potentials might feel constrained, protecting a heart that learned to expect betrayal. Your abundance probabilities might feel restricted by inherited scarcity consciousness. Your creative expression might feel silenced from authentic gifts you never permitted yourself to share. I'm curious as you're exploring this conscious observation right now. What are you noticing in your probability field? Share in the comments what patterns or insights are arising for you. These aren't merely mental observations. They're karmic. Your consciousness has been encoding your life, storing the probability residue of every belief in its templates. That career limitation might be holding failure experiences you never fully processed. The relationship constraint could be carrying betrayal patterns that were never yours to inherit originally. But here's the beautiful aspect of conscious observation. It doesn't just reveal these patterns, it helps transform them. Each conscious observation is like gentle renovation work on your inner probability template, clearing old restrictions, opening blocked potentials, restoring the natural probability flow that wants to move through you. What happens during this clearing process is truly remarkable. As you observe consciously into areas of restriction or limitation, you're not just releasing mental blocks, you're actually liberating trapped probabilities, collapsed timelines, and even inherited patterns that have been stored in your consciousness matrix. Your epigenetic inheritance itself carries information from your ancestors, including their limitations, fears, and collapsed possibilities. Conscious observation can actually help clear these inherited probability restrictions, freeing you from timelines that may have been running in your lineage for generations. Scientists are now discovering that trauma creates specific observation patterns that get transmitted through consciousness inheritance. if your grandfather experienced deep scarcity and never fully transformed it, that scarcity probability signature, including its corresponding observational bias, can show up in your manifestation field even if you've never experienced that scarcity yourself. This is why some people have limitation patterns about things they've never actually encountered. But here's the empowering truth. Just as these patterns can be inherited, they can also be transmuted. When you consistently observe from sovereign states, you're not just healing your own probability field. You're actually healing the ancestral matrix. Your conscious observation sends transformation frequencies backward through time to your ancestors and forward through time to future generations. You become a healing bridge across timelines themselves. Imagine slowly ascending through your inner probability temple's levels with each observation. As you observe into your heart field, you're visiting the love chamber, the seat of connection, worthiness, and relational possibilities. As your awareness moves into your solar plexus, you're entering the power and sovereignty chamber where your deepest selection capacity resides. With each observation, you're not just acknowledging these spaces. You're purifying them, blessing them, reclaiming them. Egyptians built their pyramids to align with stellar geometries, creating structures that could channel cosmic probabilities into earthly manifestation. Through conscious observation, you're doing the same with your awareness field. You're aligning your inner architecture with the higher probability streams of love, abundance, and creative power that want to collapse through you. This isn't about perfecting your probability template or forcing it to be different. It's about learning to architect it consciously, to honor the quantum intelligence that's been guiding you all along, and to clear the observational blocks that have been preventing your fullest timeline expression. Once your inner probability template is constructed, something remarkable begins happening to everything around you. Scientific research has proven your observation creates a probability field extending into the quantum vacuum itself, meaning you're unconsciously collapsing timelines for everyone in your awareness sphere right now. That remarkable occurrence around you isn't just poetic metaphor, it's measurable quantum mechanics. Princeton's peer laboratory research demonstrates that human observation generates a probability field extending far beyond individual consciousness. This field changes dramatically based on your observation pattern. When your observation is scattered, fearful, or limitation-focused, your field broadcasts those probability biases to everyone within its reach. But when your observation becomes coherent, intentional, and possibility-focused, your field becomes a potential source that others can actually entrain with. Think of your observation field like a quantum probability attractor. When you observe from scarcity or catastrophizing thoughts, you're like someone creating a gravity well that pulls limitation probabilities into materialization, affecting everyone in your field. But when you observe from that sovereign center we've been cultivating, you become like a probability lighthouse, illuminating pathways to higher timeline potentials for all who enter your awareness. Have you ever entered a situation and immediately felt either constrained or expanded without anyone explaining why? Have you noticed how certain people seem to carry possibility wherever they go, while others seem to broadcast impossibility? This isn't perception bias. It's the observation field in action. We're constantly transmitting our probability selection pattern through our awareness's quality and focus. Others are receiving these probability signatures whether they realize it or not. Children are especially sensitive to these fields. They haven't learned to override their natural quantum receptivity, so they respond immediately to the probability signature we're broadcasting. When a parent observes with stress and catastrophizing, children often become anxious or resistant without understanding why. But when that same parent takes a few sovereign observations and settles into their selector consciousness, the child often naturally opens to higher possibilities, as if by resonance. This field effect extends to every interaction you have. When you observe consciously before challenging conversations, you're not just preparing yourself. You're creating a probability container that can hold whatever needs to emerge. When you walk into your workplace centered in your sovereign observer, you're subtly influencing the entire probability atmosphere, making it easier for breakthrough solutions and collaborative emergence to collapse into form. But there's an even deeper layer to this field effect that most people never discover. Your observation field doesn't just influence the people around you. It influences the very structure of probability itself. This isn't mystical speculation. It's cutting-edge quantum theory. The work of physicists like John Wheeler demonstrates that observation and probability are intimately connected at the foundational level. When you observe from a coherent state, you're actually creating what researchers call retrocausal effects, observation patterns that can influence probability distributions backward and forward in time. These effects can alter outcome probabilities, making certain timeline collapses more likely while making others less likely. This is why people who maintain coherent observation states regularly report increased synchronicities and seemingly miraculous manifestations. Think about the implications of this. Your observation isn't just affecting your interpretation or your mood, it's literally participating in the selection of timeline probabilities at the most fundamental level. Every coherent observation you make is like casting a vote for which probability wave collapses into your experience. Every unconscious observation is like a vote for more of the same automatic timeline patterns. The Tibetan Dzogchen masters understood this deeply. They developed elaborate observation practices called trekcho, which literally means cutting through. They knew that sovereign observation could slice through karmic probability patterns, actually changing the trajectory of seemingly fated timelines. What appeared like fixed destiny could be transformed through the power of conscious selection. Modern research is beginning to validate these ancient insights. Studies on global consciousness effects show that when large groups focus observation simultaneously on specific outcomes, measurable probability shifts occur in quantum random systems. The coherent observation states generated by sovereign awareness literally organize chaos into selected order, not just in human perception, but in the probability field itself. This is why collective intention through consciousness is not just possible, it's quantum mechanically predictable. When enough people learn to observe from sovereign states, we'll begin seeing spontaneous materialization of breakthrough solutions, unexpected resolution to seemingly impossible conflicts, and emergence of innovations from the collective probability field of human consciousness. You're not just learning a personal practice, you're becoming part of the morphic field shift to humanity's greatest timeline potential. Every observation you make from full sovereignty contributes to the probability elevation of our species and our planet. This is the true meaning of conscious evolution. Not just improving individual lives, but participating in the timeline selection of consciousness itself. The beautiful aspect of understanding your observation field is recognizing how entangled we all truly are. You're not just an isolated consciousness trying to collapse your preferred outcomes. You're part of a vast probability web. Every observation you make with sovereignty contributes to the overall field of potential and possibility on this planet. But this influence isn't something you need to strategize about or manage. It happens naturally when you focus on aligning your own inner probability template. The field responds to coherence, not performance. When you observe from a genuine place of presence and sovereignty, that genuineness radiates outward without any effort on your part. This is why ancient teachings often spoke of the awakened being as someone who serves simply by observing. They understood that consciousness itself is entangled, that coherence is contagious, and that one person observing from their sovereign center can shift an entire probability field's collapse pattern. You've journeyed far without leaving your position, not across territories, but across layers of yourself through observation, selection, superposition. The most accomplished reality architects in history mastered something you've never been taught: how to access infinite probability through absolute non-collapse. In traveling through your own layers, You've discovered something the consensus reality doesn't want you knowing. The most powerful selection is often complete non-selection. We inhabit a culture that worships decisive action, telling us more choices equal greater outcomes, keeping us constantly deciding, constantly collapsing, constantly forcing toward definite results. But the field, the quantum probability field responding to your consciousness, operates by entirely different principles. The field doesn't respond to your decision intensity. It responds to your coherence quality. It doesn't care about your manifestation lists or vision boards. It cares about your frequency, your observation pattern, your being state. The most coherent state of all is superposition. Not the superposition of confusion or indecision, but the dynamic superposition of a quantum system. Consider a quantum particle in superposition. It appears completely undefined, yet it's tremendously potent. It doesn't struggle against measurement. It allows collapse when appropriate. It doesn't chase one state. It simply holds all states. Possibilities exist within it. Probabilities dance around it. Yet it remains centered in its own quantum nature. This is the kind of superposition that manifests worlds. When you learn to observe into this quantum-like superposition, something extraordinary happens. Reality begins offering itself to you instead of resisting you. Timelines you could never have forced begin appearing naturally. Circumstances that can serve you seem to arrange themselves at precisely the right moment. Solutions to problems you've been collapsing repeatedly suddenly become obvious. This isn't mysticism. It's quantum coherence. When you're in a state of superposition and sovereignty, you're no longer broadcasting the chaotic signals of forcing, controlling, or premature collapse. Instead, you're emanating the clear frequency of openness, receptivity, and quantum alignment. The field responds to this clarity by organizing probability distributions to match your state. Consider Schrödinger's cat. All around the box, scientists debate and theorize. Calculation and prediction swirl in every direction. But within the box is perfect superposition, perfect quantum ambiguity. From that center, multiple realities coexist simultaneously. This is the kind of superposition you can cultivate within yourself. Not the superposition of someone who has given up choosing, but the superposition of someone who has learned to be their own timeline's quantum selector. The difference between forcing collapse and allowing optimal collapse becomes crystal clear in this superposition. Forcing attempts to prematurely collapse quantum possibilities into specific outcomes. Allowing optimal collapse permits quantum coherence to select the highest probability timeline. Forcing is exhausting because you're collapsing against the natural probability flow. Allowing is effortless because you're cooperating with it. When you observe consciously, when you rest in superposition awareness, when you inhabit your probability template fully, you're not trying to make specific outcomes happen. You're allowing optimal outcomes to collapse through you. You become a clear channel for the universe's quantum intelligence to express itself in your timeline. Tell me in the comments what old probability pattern or collapse timeline are you ready to release through this practice? What transformation timeline are you calling in? This doesn't mean becoming passive or indecisive. True superposition is incredibly alive, incredibly aware. It's the superposition of a quantum system just before optimal measurement. Completely coherent, completely present, completely ready for whatever emerges from this place. Your selections become effortless and incredibly effective because they're arising from alignment rather than force. But here's what happens when you truly embody this superposition. You begin to access what I call the infinite probability field. This is a state where all potential timelines exist simultaneously, waiting for sovereignty to collapse them into experience. In this field, there are no predetermined outcomes, no fixed futures, no impossibilities, only infinite creative potential. The ancient Vedic texts called this state Turiya, the fourth state of consciousness beyond waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. In Turiya, you're not experiencing collapsed reality. You're participating in its probability selection. Time becomes non-linear. Space becomes probability. And what you once thought were fixed laws of manifestation reveal themselves to be more like probability tendencies that sovereignty can navigate. When you observe from this infinite probability superposition, you're not trying to collapse specific outcomes. You're opening to the highest timeline that wants to emerge through you. Sometimes this looks like what you thought you wanted. Sometimes it looks completely different, but serves your evolution in ways you never could have imagined. This is the difference between ego manifestation and quantum manifestation. Ego manifestation tries to force consciousness to collapse what it thinks it needs. Quantum manifestation allows consciousness to select what it knows you need for your highest timeline evolution. The ego creates from scarcity and control. Quantum consciousness creates from infinite probability and sovereignty. The most profound realization is that you don't need to become anything or achieve anything to access this infinite probability field. You already are it. You've always been it. The practices we've explored, conscious observation, sovereign awareness, superposition states, aren't about creating something new. They're about remembering something eternal. Every observation you've ever made has been the universe observing itself through you. Every timeline you've ever experienced has been consciousness exploring itself through your unique probability signature. Every reality you've ever collapsed has been infinite potential expressing itself in specific form. You are not a separate observer trying to collapse preferred outcomes. You are the quantum field experiencing itself as you. When this truth lands not just as an idea, but as a lived reality, your entire relationship with manifestation transforms. You stop trying to get reality to collapse for you and start allowing reality to collapse through you. You stop seeing yourself as a collapsed particle trying to become a wave and recognize yourself as the wave function expressing itself as temporary particle. This recognition doesn't make you passive or detached. It makes you incredibly responsive and sovereign. But now your observation comes from wholeness rather than need, from completeness rather than seeking, from contribution rather than extraction. You become what the Taoists called a sage, someone whose selections arise spontaneously from perfect alignment with the natural probability flow of existence. Right now, I want you to take a moment and comment below with this phrase: I choose to observe as sovereign selector. This isn't just a comment. It's an energetic declaration to the probability field that you're ready to step into this new way of being. It's a conscious interruption in the old loop of unconscious collapse. As you've journeyed through this understanding, if this material is touching something deep within you, then I invite you to subscribe not just to this channel, but to this frequency. This is more than content consumption. You're joining a movement of sovereign beings who understand that timeline transformation begins from within. You're aligning with a community that knows observation collapses reality. Now, as you prepare to leave this space, take this understanding with you. You return not to who you were, but to who you've always been beneath the automatic patterns. Observation brought you here, and now it reveals the final truth. Superposition is not the absence of power. Superposition is power itself. You've journeyed through the sacred nature of observation, discovering that those 35,000 daily observations are not mere perceptual functions, but opportunities for conscious timeline selection. You've awakened the sovereign observer within, that eternal part of you that selects probabilities, like choosing which wave collapses across an infinite ocean. In the superposition awareness between collapsed states, you found the sacred doorway where intention materializes into probability. Through building your inner probability template, you've learned that your consciousness is not just awareness and thought, but a living architecture, storing your timeline patterns while offering pathways to transformation and timeline shifting. You've discovered that your observation creates a probability field extending into the quantum vacuum itself, making you a constant broadcaster of limitation or possibility to everyone in your awareness sphere. And finally, you've touched the profound truth that the most powerful collapse is often remaining in superposition, the dynamic quantum state that allows optimal timeline selection to organize itself around your sovereign presence, rather than forcing premature collapse through anxious decision. There will be moments when the world pulls you into automatic collapse, when emotion triggers reactive observation, when thoughts spiral into limitation focus. In those moments, remember the shortest path home is sovereign observation. 3 conscious observations can bring you back to the selector. 1 superposition pause between collapse states can reconnect you to the probability field. A single moment of quantum awareness can restore your inner template. This isn't about perfection, it's about returning. Each time you remember to observe sovereignly, you're not just improving your day, you're reshaping your timeline from the quantum level up. You're becoming a living demonstration that observation, not circumstance, is the true collapse force. And here's something beautiful that happens as you continue this practice. You begin to notice that reality starts selecting you back. The boundaries between your personal observation and the universe's observation of itself begin to dissolve. You realize that every focused awareness is the quantum field giving itself to you, and every open reception is you giving yourself back to the field. This reciprocal observation becomes a constant dialogue, a continuous communion with the creative probability force of existence. In this state, synchronicities multiply exponentially. The right timelines appear at the perfect moments. Opportunities align in ways that seem statistically impossible. Solutions emerge from superposition. Resources flow effortlessly. This isn't because you're manipulating probability. It's because you've stopped collapsing reality prematurely, with consciousness operating from its natural tendency to support sovereign observation in its highest timeline expression. You begin to understand that what you once called miracles are simply what happens when observation operates from its natural state of quantum coherence. Manifestation becomes natural. Abundance becomes effortless. Love becomes unconditional. Peace becomes unshakable. Not because you've forced these collapses, but because you've stopped blocking their natural probability. The ancient quantum mystics knew this secret. They understood that the ultimate manifestation practice isn't about collapsing desired outcomes. It's about removing the observation blocks to the optimal timeline that's already probable. And sovereign observation is the master key that unlocks every probability, dissolves every limitation pattern, and reveals the infinite potential that has always been your true quantum nature. As you embody this understanding more fully, you become what I call a timeline anchor, someone whose very observation pattern reminds others of their own infinite probability nature. You don't need to teach or convince or collapse anything for anyone. Your sovereign observation state becomes a silent invitation for others to remember their own quantum truth. This is how consciousness evolves, not through force or premature collapse, but through the magnetic power of coherent embodiment. The work you're doing isn't just personal timeline shifting, it's collective probability transformation. Every moment you choose sovereign observation over automatic collapse, you're contributing to the collective awakening of our species to its quantum nature. You're helping to birth a new paradigm where observation is recognized as the primary collapse mechanism in the universe. There's a critical mass effect happening right now on our planet. As more people awaken to their true nature as sovereign observers, the collective probability field is reaching what scientists call a phase transition, a point where the entire system shifts into a new timeline pattern. Your individual practice of sovereign observation is part of this larger evolutionary moment. You're not just selecting your timeline, you're participating in the timeline selection of human consciousness itself. The indigenous wisdom keepers have always known this time would come. The Hopi prophecies speak of the great choice when humanity would remember its power to select reality. The Mayan calendars pointed to this era as the collapse of one cosmic cycle and the emergence of another. The Hindu texts describe this as the transition from Kali Yuga to Satya Yuga, from the age of unconscious collapse to the age of sovereign selection. What all these traditions understood is that this transition wouldn't happen through external force or dramatic interventions, but through the quiet revolution of individual consciousness, awakening to its quantum observer nature. Every person who learns to observe sovereignly becomes a seed of this new timeline, helping to anchor higher probability frequencies into our collective reality field. Before you go, drop one word in the comments that captures the timeline you're choosing to collapse into form moving forward. This is your probability signature to the quantum field, a declaration of the frequency you're selecting into. And if you haven't already, subscribe not just to stay connected, but to stay coherent with this understanding. The more of us who embody this truth, the more the collective field reflects that probability. Consider making this practice part of your daily rhythm. Perhaps watching this video each morning to anchor this frequency as you begin your day. Or share this with someone who's ready for this understanding. When you share these quantum observation concepts, you create a probability ripple effect that expands collective coherence while reinforcing your own embodiment of these principles. Every share accelerates the collapse of a more conscious timeline for humanity. Now, as you leave this space, take this understanding with you. Let your observation be your compass. Let superposition be your throne. Let sovereignty walk with you in every glance, every focus, every selection. So observe, not to passively witness, but to remember, not to collapse prematurely, but to select optimally, not to control outcomes, but to architect timelines. The observation is the key. You are the collapse point. Step through. Now that you understand how observation creates your probability signature, you're ready to discover what the quantum field actually collapses in response to. There's one specific element that determines whether your timelines materialize or dissolve into unrealized potential. And understanding this changes everything about how you approach manifestation itself. The secret lies in coherence. Not the coherence of forced positivity or manufactured belief, but the coherence that emerges when your observation, emotion, and intention align into a single unified probability wave. This coherence creates what physicists call constructive interference, where multiple probability waves amplify each other rather than canceling out. Most people are broadcasting contradictory probability signatures every moment. They observe abundance while feeling scarcity. They visualize success while emotionally expecting failure. They affirm worthiness while unconsciously collapsing unworthiness timelines. These contradictory signals create destructive interference in the quantum field, where probability waves cancel each other out, leaving you stuck in the same collapsed reality loop. But when you master the coherent state, when your sovereign observation aligns with genuine emotional resonance and clear intention, you create a probability laser beam, a focused, amplified collapse signature that the quantum field cannot ignore. This is the missing element in every manifestation teaching that has failed you. It's not about what you observe, or even how intensely you observe it. It's about the coherence quality of your entire being state during observation. This is what the ancient Egyptians meant by the unified heart-mind. This is what quantum physicists mean by phase-locked wave functions. This is what mystics throughout history have described as one-pointed awareness. When you achieve this coherent state, even for brief moments, you bypass the usual timeline resistance. The probability field recognizes your signal as clear instruction rather than confused noise. Timelines that seemed impossible suddenly become accessible. Manifestations that required years of struggle suddenly collapse into form within days or weeks. The research is undeniable. When HeartMath Institute measured people in coherent states, They found dramatic increases in DHEA, the longevity hormone, and dramatic decreases in cortisol, the stress hormone. But more significantly, they found that people in coherent states could influence random number generators at statistically impossible levels. They were literally collapsing probability through coherence. Dr. Roland McCrady's research demonstrated that this coherent state creates measurable changes in the electromagnetic field around the body, extending up to 15 feet in some cases. Your coherent observation isn't just changing your internal biochemistry. It's restructuring the probability space around you, influencing which timelines become accessible and which fade into unrealized potential. This coherent state has three essential components that must align simultaneously. First, sovereign observation, where your awareness is fully present rather than scattered across past regrets or future anxieties. Second, authentic emotion, where you're genuinely feeling the reality of your desired timeline rather than manufacturing fake enthusiasm. Third, clear intention, where you know precisely which probability you're selecting without contradiction or doubt. When these three elements synchronize, you enter what I call the collapse vortex, a state where the quantum field responds with unprecedented efficiency to your probability selection. In this state, you're not pushing against reality, you're pulling your preferred timeline toward you through magnetic coherence. But here's what most people miss. This coherence cannot be forced or faked. The quantum field doesn't respond to performance or pretense. It responds only to authenticity. This is why affirmations repeated without genuine feeling fail. This is why visualizations practiced with underlying doubt collapse the opposite timeline. The field reads your total coherence signature, not just your conscious intention. The pathway to genuine coherence begins with radical honesty. You must first acknowledge where you actually are, what you're genuinely feeling, which timelines you're unconsciously collapsing through habitual observation. Only from this foundation of truth can authentic coherence emerge. Only when you stop pretending and start observing can real transformation begin. Think of it like tuning a musical instrument. You can't create beautiful music by pretending the instrument is already in tune. You must first acknowledge the discord, then make precise adjustments until harmony emerges. Your consciousness works the same way. Acknowledge the incoherence, observe it without judgment, then gently guide your system toward alignment. This is the practice that changes everything. Each morning, before you begin collapsing your day through automatic observation, pause. Take 3 sovereign observations. Notice where your awareness actually is, not where you think it should be. Feel what emotions are genuinely present, not what you wish you felt. Recognize which timelines you're unconsciously selecting through habitual thought patterns. From this foundation of truth, you can then consciously choose. You can redirect observation toward preferred probabilities. You can cultivate authentic emotions that match those probabilities. You can clarify intentions that align with your highest timeline. This is coherence building, and it's the most powerful manifestation technology ever discovered. The ancient alchemists encoded this wisdom in their cryptic texts. When they spoke of turning lead into gold, they were describing this exact transformation. Lead represented incoherent observation, scattered across contradictory probabilities. Gold represented coherent observation, unified in clear selection. The philosopher's stone wasn't a physical substance. It was the coherent state itself, the inner alignment that transmutes limitation timelines into abundance timelines. The Kabbalists understood this as the unification of the Sephirot, bringing the fragmented aspects of consciousness into harmonious alignment. The Taoists described it as the marriage of heaven and earth, where spirit and matter unite in coherent expression. The Buddhist Tantrics called it the union of wisdom and compassion, where clear seeing and authentic feeling collapse into enlightened action. Every wisdom tradition points to the same quantum truth. Coherence is the collapse mechanism. When you achieve it, You don't just change your experience of reality. You change which reality collapses into form. This is the ultimate sovereignty, the recognition that you are not a victim of collapsed circumstances, but a conscious architect of probability selection through coherence cultivation. As you move forward from this teaching, understand that you now possess knowledge that has been hidden in mystery schools for millennia. You know the mechanism by which observation collapses probability. You understand the superposition state where all timelines coexist. You recognize the coherence signature that determines which timeline materializes. But knowledge without application remains potential without collapse. The question now is not whether you understand these principles, but whether you'll embody them. Will you continue observing automatically, collapsing the same limitation timelines through unconscious habit? Or will you become a sovereign observer, consciously selecting optimal probabilities through coherent awareness? The choice, like everything in quantum reality, is yours to collapse. Every observation from this moment forward is an opportunity to demonstrate your sovereignty. Every coherent state you cultivate is a vote for the timeline you're calling into form. Every moment of authentic presence is a declaration to the quantum field that you remember who you are. You are not a passive witness to predetermined reality. You are the collapse point, where infinite probability becomes specific experience. You are the observer whose awareness determines which wave function materializes into particle. You are the sovereign selector whose coherence shapes the very fabric of your experience timeline. This is not philosophy or metaphor. This is quantum mechanics applied to conscious living. This is the science of sovereignty, the technology of timeline selection, the art of probability collapse through coherent observation. The quantum field is listening. It has always been listening. It's waiting for your coherent signal, your clear instruction, your sovereign selection. What timeline will you collapse into form? What probability will you energize with sustained, coherent observation? What reality will you architect from the infinite possibilities surrounding you in this eternal moment? The collapse moment is now. The choice is yours. The power has always been yours. Remember it, embody it, become it. And watch as reality reorganizes itself around your coherent observation, collapsing timelines that once seemed impossible into experiences that become inevitable. This is your quantum birthright. This is your sovereign nature. This is the collapse moment where everything changes. Welcome home, conscious observer. Welcome to your power.